Members, we now come to the Building Earthquake-Prone Buildings Amendment Bill. The question is that Part 1 stand part, and just to make it clear, this is clauses 3 to 41B in the schedule. David Seymour's 2 amendments, and there is debate on Ron Mark's amendment, but at the appropriate time, it will be ruled out of order because it's of an omnibus nature and outside the scope of the bill. Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we kick off the committee stages on the Building Earthquake-Prone Buildings Amendment Bill, I want to focus on the two, in my opening remarks, on the 2 supplementary order papers in the name of David Seymour. Now, Mr. Seymour has put up a couple of these amendments which pertain to Part 1 of the bill that I think deserve some serious discussion. So the first is number 152, basically reflects the advice that G&S came to the committee and submitted, and would make it so that areas that are in the low seismic risk zone, so we're talking about Auckland and Northland, where it's basically deemed to have an extremely low risk of a severe earthquake, for example, 1 in 110,000 years. David Seymour's amendment would let that entire part of the country off the hook completely when it comes to the requirements of this Act, of this bill. And the argument is that including the buildings in this bill would have minimal benefit, but would impose large costs on private property owners. Now, Mr. Chairman, we approached this debate genuinely with an open mind, and I would like to invite the Minister and the Chair to take a call on this and to share with us the government's view and officials' advice so that we can have a real debate about David Seymour's amendment. It's worth, I think, on the face of it, taking seriously because it's based on G&S's submission to the Select Committee. I suppose the basic question of logic that I have is that this House and the committee has created this stepped risk-based approach that is now fully reflected in the bill, based on the idea of dividing the country up into zones of seismic risk. I think everybody accepts the logic of that. But the question is, if we're going to allow a large part of the country to be completely let off the hook when it comes to the requirements of earthquake strengthening in this bill, is that a step too far? Is that driving a bus right through, perhaps not the middle, but the side of this bill? Is that a step too far? Is the science precise enough that we can say with any level of certainty that that the risks, given that G&S came along to the committee and said, actually, seismic risk differs from place to place throughout the country, and you need quite a fine-grained analysis of the areas of seismic risk. Can we be sure enough to support David Seymour's amendment that there really is insufficient risk to justify imposing the requirements of this bill on a very large part of the country? As David Seymour says, this will, even alone, just the costs that will be imposed on the owners of buildings in getting the assessments done, that is a very significant cost. On the other hand, the risk-based approach that is now in the bill will mean, I think, that, for example, a non-priority building in Auckland, for example, would have a 50-year, I think, a 50-year, when you add up the different components, a 50-year time frame before remediation would have to be completed. And if it was a heritage building, the owners could apply for a further 10 years That's a long time in anybody's book. And I think that's the kind of counter-argument to David Seymour's amendment. So I want to just make it clear, we approach this with an open mind. We would really like to hear from the government's point of view on this issue, and of course from David Seymour. The other amendment from David Seymour would inject into the bill in clause 6 and clause 23 an earthquake life risk rating. And I think this is also an interesting idea that we think merits serious discussion. If a building, for example, a country church is, Mr. Chairman, is deemed to be an earthquake-prone building, but it's only used for a very short period of time, sporadically, it might only have people in it for a couple of hours a week, does that justify what proportionately could be really significant costs? On the other hand, you have to wonder whether or not it would be workable to create a system that could actually be implemented and managed that would allow particular buildings to be subject to a whole other rating system as is proposed by David Seymour's SOP, and how that would be maintained over time. I mean, what if the particular building might be a sports club or some kind of community facility, has a very erratic usage pattern. So in 1 week maybe it's not used at all, and then it might be used intensively for a period of weeks or months. So these are real logistical issues that need to be debated and discussed, and I invite both the member who's put these amendments up and the Minister and the Chair to share the advice and views that are available on these two. And had lots to say about Ron Mark's amendment, but we won't waste any time on that, given that, according to the Mr. Chairman, that SOP won't be debated at all.